Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby, and I am not having wine tonight. Sometimes I drink coffee, and I will tell you, I was attempting to do I was going to do like a hot chocolate and maybe put some vodka in it, but it pretty much exploded in my microwave because, okay, this is something I will say a lot of women have too much. We have too much on our minds, and we are trying to do too many things. And I think I put 11 minutes instead of 1 minute and 50 seconds. So I'm lucky the house is here and it didn't explode. So anyway, I'm drinking in my wine a little laugh a lot glass. So for those who check it out on YouTube, I normally like to drink out of my Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl mug if I'm having coffee, but I'm having some chocolate vodka and chocolate milk over ice. And I have to say, it is rather nice. So tonight I am going to be talking with, I'm so excited. It warms my heart because I'm going to be talking with a former student of mine. I had Courtney at King's College in a couple of my classes. I taught at King's College about 7 years, part-time instructor in the communications department. And I will tell you, I don't do that anymore. Last fall, I think was my last December, when COVID hit and we were doing hybrid. It was a lot of work, and in the interest of fairness, not to be a downer, it's just not for me. Education is for people who really want to be like kind of a Mother Teresa type, I think. It does not pay a lot. A lot of young people need a lot of motivation and a little bit of maybe social work kind of moms. They need a mom in the classroom and all that. I had some great students, and then I had some that were kind of draining. So I am not doing it anymore, but I love when I find young people who are engaged, and Courtney is absolutely one of those. She would actually read the notes that I would put on her assignments and ask me what they meant. So yes, of course I loved having Courtney in my class. So I would like to introduce you to Courtney Pisano. Hello, Courtney.
Hi. I'm so excited to be here, and I always did read your notes. I know so many times I'd be like, well, what does this mean? Why is it wrong? Or why do you think I could do this better? And now I remember one of our classes, you had us put together a marketing strategy, and I thought billboards would never work, and you're like, but billboards do work. And I'm like, how? And now in my job now, I realize how much billboards do work. So definitely read your notes, and they definitely helped me in my career.
Well, that's good to hear. And to be honest, I don't want to sound like a negative person with the teaching, but it's like if you're a natural born teacher or whatever, but I came from I don't want to say the real world, but I wasn't in academia. I came from the job in marketing communications. And so I wasn't used to teaching. And if I had a room full of Courtneys, it would have been delightful, or even half a room full of Courtneys, it would have been delightful. But that's unfortunately not the case. And I don't say that to diss young people. I think some young people are not ready for college, or maybe not meant for it. And unfortunately, pressure of society and parents feeling pressure think they need to send their children, and it might not be right for them, honestly, and it might not be right for them now. So but you were, and I want to get to, you were a special student, not just because, again, I love the fact that you were there to work. Like, you were there, and you were there to accomplish something, to get a degree, and not just get a paper. You were there to learn. And I always admired that and respected that. But what I respected about you even more is that you were doing this, and you're a mom. So you were a young mom. So if you don't mind sharing, because I understand everyone is different, what they can achieve, what they think they can achieve. But that's a barrier for a lot of young women when they become pregnant young. But you did not let it stop you, which I think is awesome. Would you mind just sharing a little bit about being a young mom, how that happened? Not how that happened. I think we know how that happened. That's a stupid.
We won't get to that.
Yeah. Okay. Can I rewind? When that happened, how you handled it?
Yeah. So I was 17 when I found out that I was pregnant. I was actually accepted into a school in South Carolina, and I was pretty much ready to go there. I was really excited. I was almost a child that you would think, unfortunately there's a stigma of who becomes a teen mom and who doesn't. And so for me, even in high school, I was really focused on my education and who I wanted to be eventually. And so when I found out I was pregnant at 17, my parents were completely shocked, and so was I. So I had him when I was 18, and my parents were pretty strict and said, if you're gonna have a baby, then you still need to get an education and, find a way to eventually support yourself and not give up on your dreams. So I still knew like communications was always for me. So then I ended up obviously staying home because I just couldn't be 18 years old to move to South Carolina with a baby. So I stayed home. I applied to King's. I got in. And then, gosh, I'm not gonna lie, it's so difficult. And I feel like a lot of times people are like, oh, well, that they just think my success came so easy to me. Like, oh, well, you got through it, you know? But what they don't realize is that I was only 18 years old and I was still trying to figure out who I was. And then also I had an infant that I had to put in daycare a few months after I had him to go to school. So it was definitely difficult. I had to work a lot harder than other people, you know, because I had a full-time job to pay for daycare and all the other costs that came along with not only my education, but making sure that my son was in a good place when I went to school. So it was definitely difficult. But you know, I made it work. It was definitely a shock.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, especially like you said, that you make an interesting point about that stigma, and it is true. I'm sure we don't need to go too far down that path, but there is a certain thing where you like you would go, oh, well, that's, you know, someone gets pregnant, you're like, oh, I saw that coming or whatever. Or
Yeah.
and it's like someone who's like honor roll, honor society, certain household, certain income, you're like, wow, that happened, and you
Shocking.
don't expect it, but it did happen to you. And so your parents, it was good that they encouraged you to not give up on your dreams. Were they, how did you manage though? Did you get help like from your family to help with your child or?
Um, yeah, so my parents obviously they were still young. Well, they're even young now, but they were young when I had Michael. So they were still working. So, you know, sometimes they would watch him for an hour or two after I got out of school so I can catch up on some projects or study. But, you know, they were still raising my siblings. I'm the oldest. So, you know, now I have this baby, but they also had three other kids that they still had to take care of, you know. So it was a little difficult in that way, but they definitely supported me as much as they could. And obviously they loved having the baby around. So, you know, they would always chip in and take them or come over at nighttime and watch them so I could study. So they were pretty supportive of it.
Now, were you living on your own then? Or
So interestingly enough, my parents invested in real estate. So we had a bunch of apartments. So my dad was like, if you're going to school and you're doing all the things that you should be doing, then, you know, you just pay utilities and you can stay in the apartment. And so that's what I did. So I still had to work full time and I still had to go to school full time because they were not like, you know, they were like, you made the mess, you know, now you have to figure it out. You have to be an adult. So I was fortunate enough about, you know, that they had those properties, but at the same time, it was still, you're out on your own, and most 18-year-olds that are in college are either dorming or they're living with mom and dad, and mom and dad are probably helping them in some type of way
yeah.
financially. But for me, that wasn't the issue. So I wasn't just taking care of myself, but I was also taking care of of an infant.
Yeah. And so in a way, I mean, obviously that wasn't your, you know, plan to get pregnant young, but because you are already like you were a good student, you were already someone who's probably, I'm guessing, like an achiever. So I
Yeah,
think obviously that I would think helped you in this, or
it
else I
did.
don't know that you could have, I mean, to work, to go to school and to be a mom and basically grow up pretty fast.
Yeah, and it's funny because as much as I was an achiever, there was definitely days when I remember like walking from my car to King's campus and just being so exhausted from because I worked overnight. I mean, I went to school from 9 to 3, and then I was working 312s at a hospital. So I would work 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. So those 3 days that I was working, like I wasn't even sleeping, you know? So some days I remember like walking into King's and just being like, oh my God, like, can I actually do this? Or is this just, do I need to put this to rest?
Yeah, and you didn't take any breaks, right? As far as I know, right? I mean, you might.
Oh,
I think you kind of. I think you might have left Kings for a while, right? You went to Misericordia and came back, but you never took a
yeah.
break from college.
Yeah, no, I never took a break. I graduated on time in the 4 years with my bachelor's, and then I went back after my bachelor's for my master's.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where, like I said, I want to be careful because especially the world we're in nowadays, you do have to watch like everything can be construed a certain way. But when I meet someone like you, which I've only met, I don't meet too many people like you. And certainly in my classroom, I only knew you, who as a young mom was doing this.
Yeah.
You're getting it done. And so for me, that's what I think one of my frustrations was as a teacher. You have students who literally just can't do it because they can't do it, because they're too immature and have excuses like which may or may not even be true about why they
Mhm.
can't get their work done. And I don't recall you ever asking me for an extension or not handing something in or not paying attention or falling asleep in class. And so for me, I'm kind of like, okay, so I know everyone's at different levels and we have to be careful now, but I mean, I think we have to watch not to coddle either, because you got it
Mhm.
done. I know not everyone is you, but you
Yep.
never used an excuse in my class. And that's why for me, I find I have such great respect for what you did.
Oh, thank you. And I think with that, you make a great point with that. And for me, it was always really important to hand my assignments in on time and to, show up to my internships on time and make the most out of all that stuff, because and being a young mom, you're automatically stigmatized. It doesn't matter if I was going to college. It doesn't matter if I have a bachelor's or a master's. People still stigmatize me. And I think because of that, I held myself to a higher standard, because I thought, well, I could be a voice for all of the other young moms out there who are trying to do the same thing as me. So, yeah, obviously it's not ideal that we had a kid young, but that doesn't make it I'm not any different than the girl sitting next to me. I have the same opportunities. I have the same amount of time to get work done. I wasn't going to make an excuse for that. And also being a mom, even though Michael couldn't understand what I was doing, I thought, what, it's so important to me that one day when he's going through something difficult, I could say to him, I've been there, but you still have to rise up and you still have to find a way to get those things done. It doesn't matter. Sometimes challenges are obviously, they're not the same for everybody, but you can always find a solution. And for me, that solution was, looking at Michael and thinking, I'm gonna do something for us, and I'm gonna not give up on my dreams, because that's not fair to you and it's not fair to me.
I mean, that's so well said. And like you said, you find a way to rise up, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and like I said, nowadays I think we allow too many considerations or concessions, because for some people a hangnail is a problem. I mean, you know
Oh
what
yeah.
I mean? It's like, okay, suck it up, put a Band-Aid on it. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
there's and yes, we could say, oh, you don't know what people are going through, but again, when I look at what you did, I mean, and you obviously, you said you had a reason. You wanted to show your son and you wanted to fulfill for yourself.
Yeah.
But I mean, you also sacrificed, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
weren't, while some of these other young people are out at a party or whatever, like you certainly didn't have that kind of time
No.
to be doing
No.
that. Do
And
you
definitely,
ever, go ahead.
sorry, yeah, definitely in college. So obviously I had friends, but I wasn't like the same way that everybody else leaves college and they have like all these great friends, because for me, I had no time to connect with people or hang out with people after class. I had to go home and take care of a baby. So I always thought it was kind of interesting. I had a group project the one time, and one of the group members just like, of course, wasn't doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Not
That sounds
contributing,
shocked.
shocking, right? We
Yeah.
hear that a lot.
And she says to me, well, I have cheerleading practice and this is just too much for me. And I remember sitting there so annoyed, and I'm like, I haven't slept in 24 hours. I have to go pick up my baby after daycare, and I really don't want to do your part of the project, you know?
That is so a drop the mic moment. I have a child. Boom.
Yeah.
I'm out of here.
I was so annoyed. I was like, okay, I really don't care about cheerleading practice. I know that's important to you, but I can't pick up your slack.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I know like we're saying this, and obviously not everyone is you, because not everyone could
Yeah.
handle it. Right. But I
Yep.
mean, again, it's just the respect of that, to hold people accountable, I think is really the clue. And
Mhm.
it's like, for the student athletes, yeah, they do have workouts and they have
Oh
things that
yeah.
they have to be held a high standard to, but they also need to be students as well. They also need to be,
Yep.
and I think sometimes, unfortunately, that is kind of used as a crutch.
It is.
And, I mean, for me as a teacher, sometimes I'm like, okay, and this is going to sound snarky, but you're at a D3 school. I mean, honestly, not to sound like a,
No.
whatever, but I mean, you're doing it and you're working hard. Don't get me wrong. I get that you're up early, you're running, you're doing that stuff. I do respect that, but you're not going to make a career out of that. So you sure as hell better be putting your nose to the grinder at, and doing the work, because
Well,
that's what's going to get you a job.
yeah, especially because like they get the luxury of maybe leaving class early or not having to do a full assignment, but then there was somebody like me who I had to work really hard, and I still had to make sure that I didn't miss any days in class, so I wasn't getting points taken off. And none of that stuff was just like, oh, it's okay because they get to do it because, maybe they have a game, but like somebody who actually might need that flexibility is just that's not something that you see in higher education. And I think that hopefully, I think that will change in the future now that more people are trying to go back to school and, more people have families and college is becoming more flexible since the pandemic. But, it definitely wasn't that way when I was there, and that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, that's a great point, for anyone who is listening to this and is involved in higher education, that's something to consider to maybe try to change for the future to help young people like yourself who are moms going back to school to maybe have a little bit more flexibility or certain programs or just something that would help you with your time because it is so challenging to get everything done. Yeah.
If I can be an advocate for anything, I would definitely love to do something with higher education to help young moms like myself go to school, because there are young moms that I've met and they weren't as fortunate as me that they had the father to help. Like Michael's dad is very involved in his life, or maybe their parents weren't there, or maybe they're, fortunately at King's, all of the professors and communications were phenomenal, but not every department is like that. So if I could do anything, I would definitely love to find a way to be able to help young moms go back to school, and in a way that they're able to do it where it's not such a challenge, even if that means going a little bit longer than 4 years, but just something. Because I meet a lot of young moms who are like, oh, I can't go back right now because I'm working and I can't afford daycare, or I can't afford somebody to watch them, or I'm working 2 jobs. So I would love to eventually find a way for them to do that. I know Misericordia has a program where they help young moms. So maybe some other schools will eventually, start thinking about that. Even young dads, there's even young dads out there who, might benefit from that.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, the pandemic has certainly changed, not, colleges, it's changed the workforce. It's changed so much that hopefully, and I know, the pandemic has been tough, but like we said before, people either rise up or not. I keep joking that I'm going to write a musical called Due to COVID, because I think it's been challenging, but it also has allowed people to be like, oh, can't do it. COVID. It's like, or businesses. It's like, I would be slapped if I said this on social media, but businesses that weren't doing well before the pandemic, I'm going to let you in. Spoiler alert, they're probably not going to make it. I mean, if the person didn't know how to run a business before, so it's like throwing heaps of money at them and support now isn't going to help them, because if they didn't know what the hell they were doing before, they're certainly not going to get through this. But the pandemic, to my point, not to go off topic, but it can lead to innovation, I think, and it can lead to changes, because I know people who have started businesses during the pandemic and they're thriving. So not that we wanted this and not that it's a good thing, but we have it. And so my philosophy I talk a lot about is yes anding life. Like, instead of saying, oh, I wish it didn't happen, it did. We're going on 2 years now. So what can we do going forward? So hopefully maybe changes in college will work out in favor for young moms and other people who need to go. And I think that we're headed in that right direction.
I think so. I think the flexibility of doing it from your house now gives people gives them an advantage to get that work done, especially if you don't have a babysitter. If your classes are online and you could pay attention while your kid's at home, then I mean, that really just makes it a huge difference.
Yeah. As long as you can, if your son or daughter can be in another room playing, right, and you can pay attention, then that's not, you can get some stuff done that way. Now, you mentioned, I know you went back to school for your graduate degree. Now, did you do that while you were? I think you did that while you're working full time, also, and you went back, and you went back relatively soon after you finished college, right?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So my dream, as you kind of know, has always been to work in healthcare communications. And so that had a lot to do with me changing my major when I was at King's and then went to Misericordia, because I remember somebody said to me, you'll never be able to make it in healthcare marketing because it's so competitive. Yeah, somebody was like, you won't be able to do it. It's so competitive. And so I don't take that answer from anybody. If I want to do something, I'm going to find a way to do it. So when I graduated with my bachelor's, I started working at a local newspaper in their advertising department. I got a great mentor there. And then I started branching out to the communications department at a local hospital. And I found an alumni that was like the VP of marketing there. So I was like, oh, I'm going to try to connect. And so I emailed him and he was like, yeah, like come in, we can chat. And so he gave me a lot of great advice. And then the biggest thing with getting into that field is experience and, adding more tools to your toolbox. And so I decided that while I was getting my experience in marketing, I would go back for my master's and I would, expand my knowledge in healthcare. So not just communications and marketing, but, finance, accounting, strategy, operations, because it would only make me more valuable. So I went back and I did that, and I like school. So, so it was nice. And it's also interesting because Michael's obviously older at this point. He's 6, so it was funny to see how he looked at me now that he could understand that I was going to school, because he was in kindergarten. So I went back, got my master's, and now I'm working in marketing, but I think my master's degree will be valuable sometime down the road. Eventually, I love healthcare. So I'll probably eventually do something with it, but I went back pretty quick.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's great. And the great thing about, one of the things I used to try to say to my class is like, it doesn't matter so much the industry sometimes, although I will say get you going back with healthcare, that is an important thing, but it's really your skills and honing your skills. So like if you learned how to write, you learned, PR, you learned social media, you learned design, you can go into any industry or, field. It could be, let's say you're not really interested in automobiles, but you need a job and you work for the auto industry, you can learn about cars, right? And or the particular product, if it's for Ford or if it's for Mercedes, whatever, you can study in a couple nights and learn the history of the company, learn about the products they sell. But the skills are what you need to bring to them, and the talent, and you have that, which is great. So, but the healthcare, I mean, you never know, you might find yourself going back to it in a couple years, or in even a small capacity, something related to wellness or health.
Well, it's interesting because I've worked in healthcare all through college, and then I recently left that field, and now I work for a law firm that handles personal injury. So we do medical malpractice, and we work with a lot of victims who have been injured to a really big extent. So even though I'm not directly working in healthcare, I'm still kind of in that field of where we're advocating for people who are sick or are injured. And like you said, for me, I knew a lot about healthcare, but moving to the legal industry, I didn't know as much as I would have known in healthcare. So I think if you put the time into learning, it makes a big difference, So for me, that meant, asking a lot of questions when I first started, speaking to the attorneys, learning the lingo. So I think if you're not motivated to do those things, it doesn't matter how great your skills are, because you have to be able to combine those two areas of expertise and craft them into something that, in my case, in marketing, that's going to put out a good message to somebody who might need our services.
Yeah. Yeah. So like you said, you have the skills, but you also have that curiosity and the ambition to find things out, because and I mean, I've never had a job, and I'm sure you haven't either, where people come and go, okay, here's 75 binders with everything you need to know. You don't have to ask any questions. It's all here for you. It's all directed. Nobody does that for you. So you ask questions, and sometimes that's where I always encourage people to be inquisitive, right? Be curious, and do not think, that old saying, there's no stupid questions. I mean, granted, we have heard a few, but I mean, overall, you might be asking them something they haven't heard in a while, or that makes them think of something like, oh geez, maybe we better get the answer to that. So that's really, I mean, that's a good personal trait to have in life, I think. So you're doing that now. And you're also, I know you said recently, you're kind of also dabbling or getting more into the creative side of yourself, even if you do it a little bit on the side, and maybe for, people, your friends or whatever. Tell us a little bit about that. You're doing a little graphic design kind of for fun and different things.
So it's funny, in college, I was all about PR. I wanted to be great in corporate communications, and I had a great graphic design professor, but
we could give her a shout out. Dr.
I love Dr. Merson-Cavage. And she was amazing. And she really, she's an amazing person. So I always enjoyed her classes, even if graphic design wasn't what I wanted to do. And I always gave it 100%, but I just never imagined that I would ever want to design anything. I just wanted to do the, PR side of it. So after I got out of college, and obviously having a child, you're always taking pictures. And I was like, oh, I really want to get better at these pictures so I don't have to pay somebody else to do it. And so I took like a bunch of time learning how to do that, and then I actually started to love it. So photography led me into being more on the creative side of like the graphic design side of things. And so I started dabbling around in that. And then some of my friends and family would see what I did and they'd be like, oh, do you think you can make my invitations, or can you make these baby shower games or whatever? So I started to do that. And then eventually it just became overwhelming because everybody wants a lot of free work and I only have a little bit of time
Yes.
in the day after I work my 9 to 5. So I just, I opened up a little Etsy shop and I was like, I'm just going to push them all out there. And if you want something, take it off there or let me know and I'll customize it for you. But I can't do giant projects all the time.
Yeah, especially not for free, right?
Especially not for free. And
Yeah.
I have a child who we have lots of homework to do at night. And now with virtual learning, last year was really hard because he was at home. And now this year it's kind of back and forth. You don't know, 1 week he's in school, the next week everyone's home because of COVID. So my time has become very limited these past 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were talking before we hit the record button, and this is something I think it's worth talking about. And again, I don't want to always be sounding like I'm lecturing or being negative, but you talk about friends and family asking for favors. And I'm not dissing anybody because I think I said to you before, we're all like that. It's like human nature. And it took me, I turned 50 in September. It took me to this year to really think of the reverse side of it.
Yeah.
A lot of times we'll go to somebody, we like to go to work with people we trust, right? So if it's a friend or family member, of course you trust them, which is a good start. But we often always expect them to give us a discount, right? Like, oh, I'll go to this person and, oh, wow, how much are they going to charge me? You expect a discount. And it was just this year that I was like, you know what, that's kind of ass backwards, right? Because we should be we'll pay full price to a stranger, but we want our family members or friends to give us a discount. That means we want them to make less money. And that's just not really right. And it's funny. It hit me and I'm like, yeah, that's not right. We should not be expecting that. And the same goes in, like, I do comedy and stuff, and I do laughter yoga, and I've done many things for gratis, for free, with different places. And I can tell you, people have, a lot of nonprofits don't have a lot of money, so they often expect you to do things for free. And even people, like, I'm going to go on my rant here. How much money do some people spend a week on coffee at Dunkin' Donuts? Or if they want to go see a show in New York, maybe they'll pay $20, $30 in fees or something to Ticketmaster, but yet we don't want to pay our local performers. And I'm like, we need to really take a look at that. And if not now, then I don't know when we will, because, we're doing this push right now, support the restaurants and support local businesses. And I'm all for that. But I think we need to look at just the way everything is. Let's redo the system, because people in the arts and education have been underpaid way before the pandemic, and we need to value that. And that's totally, I'll take responsibility for that rant, but you pay Courtney, because her time's valuable. That's what I'm saying.
No, you're definitely right though. And my first job out of college was with a local paper who I was in their advertising department, and a lot of our advertisers were small businesses. And it was interesting to see during the pandemic how some of them survived by doing things that were out of the box, so I think that so many people want to, go spend their money at Walmart or at Target, but then you have, like you said, like you have these local businesses who are doing obviously restaurants were big, but who have services that we don't utilize, like we'll pay a lot of money to go to some big name when you could get probably better service with a smaller business,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I always say it's behavior. Like, my mom will be like, oh, I don't know how you keep doing it, because, I get frustrated. And I said, it's a mindset. It's hard to change behavior and mindsets, but we have to try, because what's the other option? Just throw up your hands in the air and go, oh, well, you can't do that. And it's like, it's a mindset. We just have to start shifting. That's all. It's like, I mean, we all kind of, let's face it, we know the convenience of the big stores, the big box stores. We know how convenient it is to go to Amazon, but we have to remember that the little folks, like, I don't mean little folks, we're all little folks, but the people down the road that are our neighbors, the money's going to stay local, and it's going to help person you actually look in the face, like you see them. And we really need to consider that more, because there's great value, and there's also just a certain level of humanity of just keeping money in the community and caring about people so they don't go out of business,
Oh
and if
yeah,
they have a good product, then, just pay a little more because it's worth it because it's their
it is.
time and it's handmade or something.
It is for sure.
I remember I did when my goddaughter got engaged, a local artist would do like I guess they were color pencil renderings of photographs, and
Oh,
I had the moment her fiance proposed to her, or he
oh,
was her boyfriend in Italy.
yeah,
It was this
yeah.
beautiful photo, and I had her do this, the portrait in crayons. I just remember her color pencil, and I remember my mom saying, "Oh my God, it costs that much?" And I said, "Okay, Mom, it is a little pricey, but at the same time, this is an artist, right?
It
This
is.
is one local woman artist who does these renderings of beautiful photos." And I'm like, this moment is going to hang on her wall. And it's when she got engaged in Italy. It's a special moment.
It's such a
So we
big
have to
moment.
be willing to kind of do
Yeah,
that. And I know we can't always, but do our
if you
best to kind
can.
of, yeah, if you can, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
We have to balance our budgets too. I understand that, but
Yeah, and I think you make an interesting point too, because now, with the internet, I think artists are doing better now because of the internet, because you can, like look at Etsy, for example. If you're an artist, you can easily sell your products on there, and it doesn't just have to be in like the local community, but anywhere in the world. So I think the internet has opened up a big platform for artists to get out there and actually get paid for their work, and
yes.
like look at NFTs now. I mean, so many people are doing those, and artists are making a lot of money off them, which they deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that like I heard the term this year and I'm like, not totally. And for the listeners who don't, it's kind of like, it's not tied to Bitcoin, but it's like kind of like putting in encryption, or like you own your kind of like a copyright on your artistry, right? Can we say
Yep.
that?
Yep.
Yeah. And I fully don't understand it, I will
Me
tell
either.
you,
I'm still
but
learning.
and I still don't understand Bitcoin at all. I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm like, if that's sticking around, I better learn something about it. I don't know a thing about that. But yeah, you're right about the idea of artwork. Now, the one issue that with that, not an issue, but I think one of the challenges is it's also saturated. Like there's a lot
Oh,
of people out there, so it's
so
hard to stand
saturated.
out. But at the same time, you could do a portrait for
Mhm.
someone in a different country. You
Yeah.
could connect with people around the world, which that is a really great time that we're living in. And I think the
Yeah.
pandemic too, people got more creative with that, like, let me put my stuff online, let me try to connect with people across the globe.
Yeah. Well, so like it's interesting because like my son watches YouTube. He loves YouTube, and he watches other kids play with the same toys that he has. But it's so funny because he definitely has a little entrepreneurial spirit, because he's like, well, what if we start a YouTube channel, and then I could play with my toys, and then you'll record it. And he's like, and the more subscribers we get, I can make a lot of money. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I was like, if you have time to make these YouTubes and get these subscribers, then absolutely. But it's funny to see it from, a 6-year-old's point of view, because, they don't look at the world the same as we do, where you have to like find somebody to pay you and go do a job. Whereas now they think like he sees many ways to make money, and he's only 6,
Yeah.
So I think if we started thinking like kids, we would probably be very successful, because their innocence brings so much to the table.
It definitely does. And that's the truth, that they're not jaded by so
Mm.
much, and like bad messages or negative experiences, or predispositions about thinking this is going to be like this or that. And
No.
they really excuse me, they really are pure minded. And so it's, we can actually learn a lot by just watching them play and listening
Telling
to them.
you.
I'm sure you hear a
Yeah.
lot probably, or observe a lot with your son.
Well, especially when I was getting my master's, because he was more aware of what I was doing. And some nights, like obviously my master's was a lot more in depth than my bachelor's was. So, I'd be sitting upstairs at like, 9 o'clock at night, wanting to cry over my keyboard over, a research paper I had to write. And he'd be like, Mom, you should just take a break and come back to it. I think you'll be better if you do that, So like, I'm like, what? Like, why is he telling me this? Why should I not just be taking care of my mental health myself? Why am I crying over this keyboard?
They used to say, what, out of the mouths of babes. So that was pretty good advice he was offering you
Yeah,
there,
it's like,
right?
just take a break. Like, no care in the world. There's no due date. Just take a break.
But that's good advice, right? Because I think
It is.
as we get older, we tend to think we have to do certain things, and they have to
Yeah.
be done a certain way. And yes, I mean, believe me, I'm all about respecting deadlines and people's time and everything. But if we burn ourselves out, then what can we give? Nothing. We can't really deliver anything. And then we feel bad about what we're doing. We're delivering. Oh,
Yeah.
it's not good enough. So taking those little breaks, I mean, it's such a great lesson, even from a young person's mouth to say that, but it's, they understand like, hey, take a break. It's what you
Right.
need right now, mom.
Well, it's interesting because when you talk about burnout, I think that if I could go back like those 4 years for my bachelor's, I was so burnt out. And that was just a norm. Like it was like a normal thing, like, oh, I'm burnt out, no big deal. But like it was a big deal, there should have been more times where I probably took, gave myself some breaks and spent, like there was times I would have to not go on trips or not be able to take him to Knoebels or something because I had to worry about school and about work. And so I think if I could go back, I would be like, just take those 2 or 3 hours, like the world's going to be the same tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah. It will all be waiting for you when you're
Yeah,
done.
it's not
Right.
going
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask you if there is, and you kind of answered that. What would you have done differently? Maybe give yourself a little bit more of a break, a little more time to play a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I put like strict deadlines on myself, and again I think I was really trying to prove something too, because so like my first year you have like FYE, you have to go to those seminars, and I remember I got pulled aside and the counselor was like, well, do you think that maybe you should not focus on college now and just focus on being a mom? And I remember looking at her like she had like six heads, because I was like, well, my grades are good. Like I have almost a 4.0, like I don't want to do that. So, it's funny how times have changed though, because she was much older than I was. And I feel like many years ago, you couldn't have a career, go to school and be a mom. You had to choose which one you were going to do. So I think that the standards I'd set myself to definitely led to burnout. And I don't know why I thought I had to like prove to somebody that I could do it. Like I wish sometimes I probably didn't need to get my degree as fast as I did. If I needed to go another year, I probably could have done that.
Yeah.
But I think we let society put these standards on us that if I didn't go to school and I didn't get my degree, then the world would look at me like, oh, well, she's just another teen mom. She didn't do what she was supposed to be doing. She got pregnant and now she doesn't have a great job, or she doesn't have that degree, or she dropped out of school. So I think that's my biggest advice. Sometimes when I talk to young moms like myself, like I tell them not to, to just try to get those voices out of their head, not to listen to the people who are telling them that they have to do something or they can't do something, because ultimately at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you get a degree or your dream job at 30 or 40 or 25 years old. It's just take your time and don't burn yourself out, because I'll tell you what, I when I graduated, I was like, wow, so this is what it feels like to not be burnt out. Like I was so used to the feeling of being burnt out that I didn't even know what to do with myself when I graduated. Like I felt like, oh, like I feel like I need like 4 jobs or something, because I'm just used to being stressed and I'm used to having anxiety. And now all that's gone. And I'm like, is this normal? Like something that was normal, that should have always been normal. I didn't feel that, because I just held myself to standards to ultimately please other people so that I can, skew away from the judgment. But when you get older, you realize that like none of that matters.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I mean, and I'm sure you wouldn't take back that you have this wonderful like degree now, and and like I said, you
Oh
worked really
yeah.
hard and you were a great student, but maybe just balancing things a little bit better,
Yeah.
or like differently,
Yeah.
maybe we could say. And I love what you're saying as far as, so okay, so there are not everyone maybe could do it the way you did it, but now maybe if their children are 5 or 6, and go back, like it's
Yeah.
never too late. I met a woman recently, and I was amazed. She is someone who went for her bachelor's degree at 40. And it wasn't a case of being like a young mom, but just a stay-at-home mom. And her husband was, I mean, she's older, so it was the kind of the stereotypical,
Mhm.
she took care of the kids, he worked, and then he had issues where he got laid off. So she had a part-time job, and then she used that job at a college to get the free tuition, and she took advantage of it. She got her
Yeah.
degree at 40. She got her master's degree, I think she told me, at I forget when that was, but her doctorate at like 60. And
Oh
I'm
my
like,
gosh.
yeah, yes. So because she still works for a local college. So she's in academia. But I'm like, it's those kind of folks. And I mean, I'll admit they're not a dime a dozen. You don't find a ton of people who do that. But when you do, you're like, you know what? That's where I go back to the, like, you could tell yourself you can't, or you can listen to people saying you can't. But look at these examples you have. There are some role models out there. And just if you want it bad enough, you'll perhaps find a way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I think like we get so caught up in the judgments of other people. We want to always, we don't want people to judge us. We want to always be viewed positive. But the reality of it is that these people aren't making your dreams come true. The only person who are going to make these things happen for you is yourself. So, sometimes while not everyone will agree in the way that you decide to pursue your goals and pursue your dreams, you sometimes just have to do it. And kind of say screw you to everyone who's like, oh, you should take time off, or are you sure that's something you want to do, or you're not going to make any money in that field, or I think some of the when I look back at what people have said to me, it's kind of funny now, because now they're like, we're so proud of you and we can't believe that you did that. And I'm like, but you remember that time when you told me I probably wouldn't make it this far?
Yeah, naysayers are just, it's hard because I think especially I'll say women, because this is what I've seen, women tend to undervalue themselves. And I don't just say it because it's like, oh, she hates men. No, I say it because I run into it, and I've done this myself. We don't charge enough. Like when we own our own business, we tend to undervalue ourselves and our time and our worth, and we shouldn't. And we tend to look for approval or permission. And again, the hell with that. Like, we need to do things on our own terms, and like, forget the naysayers. Because you know what? It's a lot easier for people on the sidelines who aren't risking anything. And when you're the one risking it, you get the reward, and who cares what they believed or didn't believe along the way, right?
It's funny because, after you get where you want to go, all those people are suddenly on your side. Everyone wants to be so proud of you, and everyone wants to share that success with you, but they weren't there to walk that road with you when you were trying to do it and you were struggling.
Yeah. It would be nice if they were the supporters or the cheerleaders, and you remember the ones who are, right? I mean, they're probably fewer in numbers, but those are the folks you remember who were the cheerleaders helping you out along the way. Yeah.
It's funny that you say that, because I remember every single person who told me I could do it, but the people who told me I couldn't, some of them I'm like, what was her name again? They're like, what is she doing? What's he doing now?
We don't care about those folks right now.
No, I don't care about those people anymore. But, at 18 and 19 years old, I cared most about those people.
Yeah. No, completely understandable. Yeah. And even as we get older, it's like the ones who are the harshest critics are the ones we unfortunately pay attention to the most, or the naysayers. I mean, I know it myself when I've done presentations or comedy or whatever, I will be focused or dwelling on the one person who's not laughing, or the one person who has a look of like, what the hell is this? Or disapproval or disengagement. I'm like, why don't they like me?
Yeah, I know. And I think like last year I really worked on that. Like that was one of my goals last year, was to stop listening to what that one person had to say and pay attention to all the other things, all the other great things that people had to say. I love constructive criticism, but what I don't like is people who are just mean. So I try to look at them differently. If you have something that's going to help me do better at my job or be a better person, then absolutely share it with me. But if you're just being mean, then, my new thing is like, okay, I'm just going to brush it off my shoulder and move on from it.
Yeah. And that's good advice. I always think of the one quote, and they say it's from Henry Ford. It's attributed to him anyway. I always love it. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So, I mean, it's so much directed from who you are and what you do. It's your choice, really. And it's really at the end of the day, even with supporters, which can be great. Like, I know I have great family members who support me and help me, but at the end of the day, you're doing it by yourself. Ultimately, like you are going to do it or you're not. And that's up to you.
Yeah. And I mean, that's an interesting point, because when I had my son at, 17 years old, that was kind of like the mentality of it, was that if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Nobody else can do it for me.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. That's with everything in life, right?
Yeah.
So is there, as we wrap up here, it's been wonderful talking to you, and I'm so proud of you. And I don't want to say that at all in a condescending way. I'm just so proud. You're such an amazing, ambitious young woman, and I'm so happy for all your success. Is there anything else that you wanted to add or say in closing?
I think that if anybody is listening that is struggling, you don't have to be a young parent, but if you're just struggling in general, trying to, get where you want to go, just take it day by day and block out the voices of the people who are not supporting you. Find a way to make it happen and rise up.
Well, that's great advice. And honestly, you are proof. And again, it's such a pleasure. I'm so glad we were able to reconnect.
No.
And in fact, the fact that you listen to my podcast, I'm thrilled. I was like,
Of
oh
course I
my
do.
gosh, a young person listening to me, what I have to say.
Of course.
But thank you so much.
Yeah.
Honestly. So Courtney, watch out for Courtney Pisano because she's a rising star as far as I'm
Oh, thank
concerned.
you.
You're going to see her out there. So thank you again for joining me, Courtney. And thank you everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to another episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. And hey, I'm Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. I really do appreciate your time, and I hope that you'll lend me your ears a little bit more time when we have another episode that drops next week. Every Thursday, look for it, whether it's over coffee in the morning, driving your kids to school, driving yourself mad, or in the evening over a Chardonnay, a Shiraz, you name it. There is no bad wine to enjoy this show with. But I do thank you, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass. And you know what you could do? Be sure to share this podcast with a friend and be sure to subscribe. Again, you've been listening to Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl.